This video has been prompted by a query from a fellow Gmax modeler who's having some problems with textures, and so what I'm going to do is demonstrate how to use textures on non-standard shaped buildings. By non-standard shapes I mean, if we go up here in Gmax, boxes, spheres, cylinders, cones, tubes, etc. Well, most of the world is not made up of, does not comprise of these alone. It's of combinations of shapes. So invariably the textures that we use to make models for Trains Railway Simulator in Gmax, we have to do a fair bit of editing of the textures. And this model I've got in front of me here is what I'm working on at the moment, which is the station on the Liverpool Overhead Railway for Seaforth Sands. And this is the station curving away here. It's just in its early stages. I've got to create shelters and that sort of thing. This is just the platforms, and this is going to be a single fixed track model, and I'm going to come back to this in a future video, but I'm just using this to show how, although the shapes are quite complex, curves and all sorts of irregular shapes, they're made up of basic well, what they call standard primitives here in trains. But for this tutorial, what I'm going to do is just use one of the textures. That's the texture I use to make the viaduct, and you can see I've got some work to do here because the texture of the viaduct here has to align with the modelled pieces of the that are on the face of, that's the face of the long girder, and there are small girders or riveted plates down here in line with these verticals, which that texture is missing. They're correct there. Well, they're almost correct there. I've still got to adjust those as well. Let's make sure we have texture correction on. There we are. You can see they've jumped into the correct place, but on this girder they're wrong. You can see here that those are in the wrong place, and also there's a number of other issues, but that's we'll come back to that in a future video. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make a new file, but with the same with the same settings. It's taking a moment because that's a big model. That's 35,000 polys, so I can't export it into Trains. And here's my material navigator, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new one, ignore what's there, and I'll call it viaduct texture. And if I navigate, this is my Liverpool overhead folder, and I bring it down to here, you'll see I've got, where are we, viaduct texture there. I've got two versions actually. We'll use the first one, that'll do us, and I'll call it viaduct, so that immediately updates up here. Let's make sure we've got that turned on. There we are, viaduct texture. Okay, and the texture itself looks like this. So here's my paint program I use all the time. So you'll see it's 512 by 512 pixels, that's showing in pixels, and it has a single panel of the viaduct. It has riveted sections. It has a much lighter colour here and a couple of greys, stippled greys. I tend to use a grey, and then I put some noise, which I've reduced to two colours, to monochrome, and then I blur that on top of the things that I want. I've got a stipple over all of this as well, as you can see, just to give a bit of variety so it's not too repetitive. Okay, so that's the viaduct texture. Now it would be very nice if the world in which we live was something like, I think it's Minecraft, I don't have it, and everything comprises cubes. Well, it doesn't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an irregular shape, and then I'm going to put that viaduct texture on it. And what I want to create that shape, I'm going to use this option, splines. And let's change the view, so we're just looking, there's our 0, 0, 0, 0, that is X, Y, Z and time point. and we've got a number of splines here, which are the most useful I've found are rectangle, circle, and I think I've used the star occasionally, but the rectangle. So let's draw a rectangle. Now, this is a 2D rectangle. You'll see here in perspective view that it is just a 2D rectangle. It has no third dimension. So if I was to extrude that into the third dimension, it'd just be another rectangular cube. Well, not a rectangular cube, but, well, you know what I mean. The cube's got equal sides. But that's you know, that's not complicated enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that into an editable spline, and I've brought up the vertices, the 4 vertices which make that up, and I'm going to refine it. And I'm going to refine it by putting in 2 points at random. This is just to demonstrate it, and they've now been added, so I've got 6 vertices on that, and I'm going to move this one, and I'll move it down to about there, and then I'll just tidy up the lines, and this is so I can create an irregular shaped object. Okay, I don't really want a curve in it, so I'm going to try and by eye, let's just go in a bit. Well, that can come down, it can go up a tad. A tad is a non-standard measurement. In other words, move it over a bit. Let's just try and get that. There we are. I found that they will snap to a vertical if these 2 points are not too far apart. You might think, well, why bother with all this with this editable spline? But I've found that they can be much more useful than I originally thought. When I was first doing stuff in Gmax, I was using 3D, I was using cubes and spheres and that sort of thing, but I found increasingly that these in their right place can be very useful indeed. And I'm now going to extrude this. There we are. So I've extruded it nothing, but it does mean that there is a face either side. So let's extrude it a bit more. Let's extrude it 10 feet. That's a bit too much. Let's extrude it 5 feet. There we are. So there's an odd shape. It's not a it's not a cube. It's not a box. Let's just center it. I'm not sure about Z measure. I don't know why that hasn't centered. Oh, I know. The center point at the moment is the face that we originally created. So what we should do is go to here, affect the pivot, center to object, and align to world. And now you can see that it's not centered, so we can just move it over a bit. Because it's 5 foot, to center it's 2 foot 6. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's put our texture on it. So there we've got our object selected, and we're going to turn it into something which is got a metal panel on each face. So to do that, we go to our Unwrap UVWs, and we select a face, and we select the face and we edit it, and there it is. So let's edit that. So we want those over there, so they should be on 0, and we want those over there, so they should be on 1, and we'll take a guess and move it up to there to give us our panel. And because I've got this selected here, it's only the face that I'm working on is displayed. If I was to unclick that, you see all the other faces of the shape. Okay, so that's good. And there we are. We can see here that the selected face, I think you can just about make it out. Maybe should have used well, there we are, zoomed in a bit. I'm not worried about the actual look of the thing at the moment because the rivets are stretched here. It's not a well finished face. But then now the next one to do, we'll have a go at, is on the top, which is here, and we'll edit that, and there it is. So we'll say that needs to be, oops, That needs to be at 0. There they are. That needs to be at 1. And then we want to move that one up a bit, I think to about there, and that one up a bit about there. Let's have a look at that. Well, that seems to have worked all right. No problems there. I'm actually trying to make it do something that I don't want, so it's quite difficult. And there's that face, so let's push that up to there. Okay, that looks okay. Amazing. Except of course that it isn't, because I only pushed up the bottom bit. It's not in proportion, so I'd have to set this as well, or better yet, use my proportion tool, reduce by proportion, get it to go up here. And you just got to muck about with it so you get the correct position right. Spot on about there. Okay, well, we're doing much better than I expected. I expected a real problem at this stage, which is a bit unfortunate, because it's the problem that I'm trying to demonstrate how to avoid, how to overcome. Well, let's do that face down there, look. Edit. Okay, let's take that. Well, let's do something different with that. Let's take it over to the dark block solid colour. See if I can make things happen with that. Oh, it's not going to make the problem. Oh dear, happy days. When you don't want it to do a problem, it does it. When you want it to make a problem, it doesn't. Okay, well look, I'm not going to get anywhere trying to create a problem. So what I'm simply going to do is, if I was to now, how can I make this a problem? Yes, I know how. Supposing I thought, well, I don't actually, I want these two bits, I know this is bizarre, but supposing I wanted these two bits here to come to a point, those two edges. The design was, I changed my mind about the design, so I'm going to take those two and those two, and I'm going to, is it the y-axis? No, it's going the wrong way, isn't it? Well, let's just look down on it from above. Where are we? Here it is. See if I can adjust those. I'm not sure if I can. There we go. Yeah, there we are. Let's take that in a bit. Yeah, okay. And then obviously it's going to make a difference. It's going to make this look a bit weird. So I'm just stacking up commands at the moment over here. So let's have a look at this face. Ooh, look at that. That's way off. And let's have a look at it here. Well, it still looks alright there. But what's going to happen in trains is it's going to look more like, which way is it going? It's going to look more like that. Or it's going to even look compressed in as well, which looks pretty bizarre. Okay, so we've got our wacky shape. How do we solve it? How do we get this back to how it should be? Well, there's two ways we can do that. The first thing we have to do is, if we've altered a mesh in this way, we've got to reset its origins, and there's only one way to do that. And if you think you're going to make a mess, make a copy. Hold down the shift key and drag the copy out. That's the one we're going to work on. If it all goes wrong, we've got one we can go back to there. And also, if we wanted to, we could save another file. So in the these commands over on the right here, that's the one we want, reset xform. And if we just have a look here where the center and the pivot and everything is, then we go back to there, reset xform. And let's have a look here. Did we reset the xform? I don't think we did. No, there it is. It's a two-part thing. You've got to click on that and then reset. Now we've reset it, and it appears here. And basically what you can't do now is do much more in the way of editing with this until what I've found, until you can collapse it all down. And I collapse it down to a poly. Now let's have a look at this face, and we have a rectangular bounding box. Now we can edit that face. Let's have a look at it. Well, if it's like that at the moment, maybe we can drag it back. Let's have a go. Let's select it, and it's going to be okay. However, if we go to this one here, just copy. If we're getting this effect, this type of effect, when we're starting to texture the faces, don't worry about reset X form. What we should do is actually apply the texture correctly, because so far I haven't been applying it correctly. So what I should do here, in the edit, there's all the faces of this particular shape. I only want the one there. This is the key, planar map. In other words, map it across the texture as it is in relation to the others, but separate from it. So there we are. That's the actual way in which trains will read that effect. So what can we do? Well, we can adjust this, we can turn it around, and we can put that to vertical 1, vertical 0, horizontal 0, horizontal 1. Guess this one, which isn't very good at all, but there are other ways of doing it. And we're more or less back to where we were, except now what we've got to do is shrink this down and move it up, so that we're more or less, I think I did hit that spot on, and we're back to where we want it to be. I mean, it's still very, very awkward, because we've got this angular, this bounding box set at an angle. So still for trains, what you'd have to do before you exported that is you'd have to reset it, and then if you look at the face, that bounding box is now a rectangle. It's not been distorted in any way. Okay, so I'm hoping that is helping a bit. The key when you're texturing any sort of shape like that is you have to separate each face and adjust it, edit it separately. But the first action when you come to edit your texture is always use Planar Map. You can see there's a slight change there, and it's actually brought in some of the texture from down here. That is how Trains is seeing it at the moment. That might be the way you're seeing it in Gmax. That's how Trains is seeing it. Same here, look. We've got a very odd shape, planar. There we are, it brings it back to the rectangle. It's so important. It's a crucial part of texturing, is restoring the correct orientation. Here we are, look at what's that doing over there. So if we planar it, there it is, back to how it should be. So if this tutorial is about anything at all, it's about when you edit your faces, use the planar map, and then you edit each individual face until it is showing the correct part of your texture that you want. For example, on this texture I've included other bits and bobs. So if I wanted to, for example, I could make that display, that face display, just that colour. If we're going to see that, be able to see that in Gmax. Well, you can just about make it out there. Let's do another one. Let's move it over to here. You'll see the grey. There we are, it's gone grey. Okay, and I've gone down to the size of a pixel, single pixel, to put a colour in. If we wanted a few rivets on it, stretched right out. So in other words, in order to have it all rivets, we have to stretch out the way in which the texture is rendered. And always when you've got a texture like this, the way that Gmax it effectively repeats the texture left and right and up and down. So if you want to do a long line of rivets, you don't have to have all the rivets here. All you do is have enough to pick up the image and then just repeat it endlessly. I mean, on my Liverpool Overhead Railway viaduct, those rivets, I think on a standard piece of viaduct, length of viaduct, which is 45 feet, I repeated 9 times along here. Well, I hope that's been of help. Please post any queries that you might have. I'm happy to have a go at answering them, and I hope this gets you well into texturing with Gmax. Once you've conquered this, you will have no fear. There are other aspects which I will come to in a subsequent video. For example, texturing a cylinder. Okay, one thing to remember here is that in Gmax there's a number of, with the trains front end loaded, there are a number of defaults. It defaults to 5 height segments. 1, 2, 3. If you're just making a cylinder, you don't need them. You only need the one. And 18 sides. Unless it's very big, you can get away with 12. Okay, so that's it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to my channel and post any queries, comments and questions.